Now we're going to be talking about creative effects, and we'll end at the very end with some finishing techniques, but creative effects. So what can we do? Well, first off, we can make fun images. Here I happen to have an example of something we can do. This is known as a GIF animation. A GIF animation is an animation that'll keep running over and over and over again, and you can put it on your website and it will continuously run. It doesn't have to be as obvious as this one. Sometimes I do these and they're a little bit more subtle. And if you look at this guy doing this, I can also have him pause for a very long time and then quickly take a little lap of water and then pause for like 2 minutes before he does it again. And that's when it's rather interesting on your website. When like the picture of you on your bio page winks for a second, and then somebody looks like, did I see that move? And they stare at it and it doesn't move again until they look over and start reading your bio again, and then it winks again, you know, and that type of thing. But I just want to show you a process you can use for this, because I've seen a lot of images. There's actually a word for it. I can't think of what the word is, but it's that people will take very subtle changes. Like let's say in this particular case, instead of animating this entire image, imagine that I kept everything in the image still except for the motion of his body breathing. Imagine what that would look like, a still photograph with one little element just kind of moving. Or if you had a waterfall and you could actually have water moving in the waterfall. So let's take a look. I can also do, here's another one. Here I had a monopod, and I had my camera on the monopod, and I was just holding it up against an edge of this vehicle. I was in the seat in the back, and just randomly clicking off photos. If you have a cable release in your hand, I'm just going click, 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 and I put it together. But I want to show you a few ideas when it comes to putting anything like that together. So I don't know if you remember or not, but when we adjusted images from Iceland, I had a series of some horses. And here is what I caught a horse doing. And right there seems to be a nice one to repeat. Does that seem like it can go back and forth? So I'm going to take those images. Let's find the first one. Oh, gotta find the first. Let's say right there is where he might start. And so I'm going to take this sequence of images from the point when he's at this stage to when he goes over, over, over. I'm just looking for when he's done. Okay, well, it looks like we stopped capturing there, so I'll have to go to here. I'm going to take those images, and I'm going to go to the Photoshop menu and say Load Files into Photoshop Layers. And these images might be high resolution, and if so, I don't need them to be that big. So I'm going to scale these down. Looks like he scared them away right there, the little one's going away. But first I'm going to double check that I got the right images too. But I'll scale this down because for use on your website, which is the primary thing I use these for, we don't need a big picture. So I'm just going to turn off layers and see if we got a roll. There we go. I think I might have gotten the wrong part of the sequence because the little guy's getting up. Well, anyway, I'll still show you how to do it with these. It might not be a perfect. It might not be a perfectly smooth thing at the end because I don't know if I got exactly the right images, but I want to show you the process anyway. So this thing at the bottom of my screen usually wouldn't be there yet, so I'm going to close that. And let's just look at the overall process. What it is I would go to the image size dialog box and first scale the image down. And it's up to you how big you'd like it to be, but the way I think about things for the internet, I think I mentioned this before, is I zoom in or zoom out on my picture until it's the size I want it to look on the internet. Then I go to the image size dialog box and I look at the percentage that is showing up in the lower left corner of my picture. Do you see it down here? It says 12.5%. And I set this little pop-up menu to %, and I type in 12.5. Click OK, and it's now scaling down all my layers so that they would look the size we saw a moment ago on the internet. I can confirm that it's going to be that size now by viewing this image at 100% view. And you can get to 100% view by double-clicking on the zoom tool. That'll get you to 100%. That's how big things look on the internet. Next, I would like to turn this into an animation. And in order to accomplish that, all I need to do is go to the Window menu go down here and choose Timeline. Under the window menu, it's called Timeline. And if, when I shot these, I did not use a tripod, so my camera was moving around, I probably want to apply the command called Auto Align Layers. Remember that one? So what I would end up doing here is if you go to the Select menu, there's a choice called All Layers. That's one method for getting all the layers highlighted. And then you can go to the Edit menu and say Auto Align Layers. You just apply that. And therefore, if the camera was moving during shooting, this will compensate for it. But just know that after you do auto align layers, you usually have to crop a little bit because when it moves the layers around to align them, they won't always fill the entire screen. And I can see that here by looking at my layers panel. Can you see a hint of the checkerboard around the edge of the layers? That's because when it repositioned them, it might have needed to scale them or anything else to get them to line up. So I might grab the crop tool and just crop in a bit so that I would get rid of any of the emptiness that is in some of those layers. If I was on a tripod though, I wouldn't need to do any of that. Then I'm going to go into the timeline, which is at the bottom of my screen. Remember, I got the timeline to show up by going to the window menu, and that's where I found timeline. At the bottom in the middle of the timeline window, there is a button here. Mine says Create Frame Animation. Create Frame Animation. There's also a little pop-up to the right of it where you can switch between two choices, a frame animation or a video timeline. So if, when you look at this, there isn't a button that says Create Frame Animation, instead it says Create Video Timeline. You could change it with that little pop-up. We need a frame animation, so I'm going to click on that button, and that's going to have one frame right here in our animation. And all I'm going to do is I want a slideshow that shows one layer at a time, and to very quickly do that, all I need to do is go to the side menu on the timeline, which means go to the upper right corner of it where this little icon is, and click there, and there's a choice in there called Make Frames from Layers. Make frames from layers. And all that means is make an animation where all it's doing is showing one layer at a time. And so I'll say Make Frames from Layers. And then now I have 10 frames. And if I hit the play button, watch what happens. It animates. It's really fast though. The reason why it's really fast is because underneath each frame is a number. And that number is telling Photoshop how much should it delay before it shows the next picture. Right now it's set to 0, so it's showing them as fast as it possibly can. And that's pretty fast. So what I can do is select all the frames. Right now the last frame is selected. If I hold Shift and I click on the first one, I can get them all. And if I click on any one of those numbers that is below the frames, I can choose exactly how long of a delay I would like to put in between frames. And you just have to experiment to figure out what looks best. But if I set it to 0.2, as long as all the frames were selected at the time I did it, it will change them all. If I only had one frame selected, it would only change one. And now if I hit play, you can see how it's slowed down quite a bit. What I think is interesting is if you then take the very first frame, or the very last frame, but very first frame usually, and make the delay excessive, like 10 seconds. Or if you choose other, you could type in a higher number. That way, if this is on my website, it's going to stay static for 10 whole seconds before it does anything. So whoever views the website will start getting used to the page and won't be looking at the photo. They'll be looking at something else on the page, and then suddenly, 10 seconds later, it's going to move. And then below that, there's a little pop-up menu. See if you can see it down here. Right now it says once, and that's how many times it should repeat. So once would only play this one time and never repeat, which can really mess with people if 10 seconds after the picture displayed, it does something, and then they expect it's going to happen again, and it never does. They'd have to reload the page for it to get to play again. But otherwise, you can go over here and tell it only to repeat so many times, like 3 times or even forever. And if you choose other, you can type in whatever number you'd like. So I'll choose forever. And now when I hit play, you'll find that it's waiting 10 seconds. not doing anything, waiting 10 seconds. And after 10 seconds, it's suddenly going to, 10 seconds is really long when you're waiting for it, do that. And now it's going to wait 10 more seconds before it happens again, because I told it to loop forever. And so we can do things like that. It's just a matter of finding images that look interesting to do this. I don't know that I picked the best sequence there of the horse, but it gives you an idea of how it happens. And it looks like I still need to crop the littlest bit out on the left side, but we can do that. If you want something to look like it's continuous, like it doesn't stop ever, it just keeps moving and moving and moving, usually what you end up doing is you can copy the middle frames that are in here. You can paste them at the end, and then there's a choice over here. See, there's copy and paste frames. Then if you paste them at the end, which I'll do, copy, go to the side, paste frames, tell it to paste the frames after the one that's selected, meaning after the end. And then go back to the side menu. There's a choice called reverse frames. Change the order. That way, if the horse rolls over to one side, he's going to roll back. He's going to reverse the process. So then you can have him going, let me get rid of the 10-second delay. Okay. So then he'll go over and come back and over and come back and over. You know, you won't notice it as much on this one, but if I open one of the others that I've already done, that's what these guys are doing. This one is. This one hasn't been cropped, but actually this one hasn't been made. Hold on, I have to get the finished version. Okay, this guy, the fact that he looks like he's continuously moving, he does one full motion and then it reverses the frames to get back to the original. And the reason why you skip the first and last frames when you copy is otherwise if you copied all of the frames, pasted them at the end and reversed, you would have two identical frames right next to each other because the very last frame would be there twice and it would make a little pause in it. So you skip the end frames. But anyway, that's why he can do that continuously. I find that can look interesting with things like waterfalls. With something like a waterfall or a stream, you only need about 3 frames to get it to look that way. So let's just take maybe 3 frames here. Tools, Photoshop, load files into Photoshop layers. Just remember, if you're not on a tripod, you will need to select all of the layers. And go to Edit. My brain can't see. All right. You see auto align? Oh, auto align. It's not. It was grayed out because I forgot to select all the layers. Okay, edit auto align layers, and run that if you were not on a tripod, so that you make sure they line up. Afterwards, you will need to do some cropping. I'm not going to do the cropping part. And then all you're doing is hitting Create Frame Animation, going to the side menu, and that's where I found Make Frames from Layers. And right now, if I just hit play with no delay, I need to tell it to loop forever. And I didn't put the part that makes it reverse, but you get the sense for how you can get that. You can also mask those layers so that if I put a mask on the top 2 layers, I could mask out any motion. Let's say a bird was flying by or something. I could get rid of that part so that the background it only comes from the bottom layer, that kind of thing. There's all sorts of stuff you can do, but I just wanted to make sure you had some idea for how to do that. Now I should mention, once you have created that, if you want to put it on your website, you need to save it in the GIF file format, GIF file format, because that is the one that offers animation. It's not the best file format for photographs, and that's why you'll find that if you see this kind of thing on the internet, oftentimes it will look a little bit speckly and just won't always look absolutely ideal, and that's because of the file format that was needed to be used.